The woman accidentally witnessed her husband confessing his love to her younger sister. At that very moment, she realized the heartbreaking truth. The man she had devoted her whole heart to had always secretly loved her sister. Their marriage was nothing more than an excuse for him to be close to her sister at all times and in all places. Yiru was sitting in her room, carefully painting a family portrait. She wanted to send this painting to her parents as a meaningful gift. As her brush lightly glided over the canvas, a stray stroke of paint accidentally landed on her husband, Se-hook's eyebrow. Looking at him, Yiru unconsciously smiled happily, thinking how lucky she was to have married him. But that happiness did not last long when she received a call from her mother-in-law. Her voice was stern as she announced that she would be bringing friends over for dinner in an hour. She instructed Yiru to quickly prepare the meal. With little time and a heavy workload, Yiru asked her sister-in-law for help. However, she was met with a cold and heartless refusal. Having no other choice, Yiru hurriedly cleaned the house and rushed into the kitchen to cook. While preparing the ingredients, she accidentally cut her finger. Blood dripped down, yet no one paid any attention. Instead of receiving gratitude, she was scolded by her mother-in-law. She criticized that the food Yiru prepared was careless and merely for show. Moreover, her mother-in-law hinted that because Yiru came from a wealthier family, she did not respect her husband's family and refused to listen to her. Rather than arguing or defending herself, Yiru silently took out her bank card and handed it to her mother-in-law, hoping to appease her. Her mother-in-law, though secretly delighted, pretended to hesitate. Then she imposed another condition. Yiru must speak highly of Se-hook in front of her parents. If her father could arrange a high-ranking job for Se-hook, that would be even better. Yiru did not want to make a rash decision, so she planned to discuss it with Se-hook first. On the way home to present the painting to her parents, she called him repeatedly, but he never answered. Little did she know, at that moment, her husband was thinking about her sister, Yura. In a public place, he made no effort to hide the passionate gaze he directed at her. Upon returning home, Yiru found the house empty. When she called her mother's secretary, she learned that the entire family was attending an auction at the gallery. Wanting to deliver her gift on time, she rushed to the event. Before leaving, the secretary asked her to bring some documents from the cabinet to the auction. Without questioning, Yiru grabbed both the documents and her painting and hurried out the door. However, upon getting out of the car, she realized she'd forgotten the documents inside. Just before entering the auction hall, she spotted Se-hook's car in the parking lot. Approaching it, she noticed an envelope lying on the ground. Curious, she picked it up and opened it. Inside was Se-hook's resignation letter. Se-hook had never mentioned wanting to quit his job. Countless questions flooded her mind as she clenched the letter tightly in her hand and walked into the gallery, feeling uneasy and full of doubts. At that moment, Se-hook stood before reporters, proudly introducing himself as the son-in-law of the prestigious Hanu family. However, much to his dismay, his father-in-law had no intention of acknowledging him. He maintained a cold attitude, making the atmosphere feel awkward. Seeing her husband being treated coldly, Yiru did not hesitate. She stepped forward and took his arm, promptly declaring to everyone that they were husband and wife. This left her father in an awkward position, forcing him to pat Se-hook on the shoulder in a show of support before the public. Afterward, Yiru presented the family portrait she had painted to her mother. Her heart was filled with joy as she eagerly awaited her mother and sister's reaction. But contrary to her expectations, Ura immediately accused her of being ambitious, claiming she only wanted to display the painting in the gallery to receive compliments from others. Her mother showed no sign of being moved either. Instead, she coldly remarked that a married daughter was like water spilled on the ground once gone. It could not be taken back. She further asserted that since Yiru was now married, she should live with the mindset that even in death, she would be buried with her husband's family. Just then, a group of wealthy women happened to see the painting and began praising Yiru's remarkable artistic skills. For the sake of maintaining her image, her mother had no choice but to hang the painting in the gallery. Afterward, she turned to Yiru and asked if she had prepared the financial arrangements for the painting. Yiru nodded in agreement, knowing that these paintings would be sent to welfare organizations. Thus, instead of merely printing copies, she was making painstaking efforts to replicate famous paintings by hand. Hearing this, her mother smiled in satisfaction and advised her to ensure the paintings were perfectly identical. If you needed anything, you should let me know. While examining her painting, Yiru noticed a smudge of paint on the edge. She quickly wiped it with a cloth, but just then, her younger sister's boyfriend, Yogak, appeared. He looked at the painting and made a few remarks. At that moment, Yura and Se-hook also entered. Her younger sister maintained her usual pretense, deliberately acting as if their relationship was extremely close and affectionate. But right after, she spoke words that publicly humiliated Yiru in front of everyone. Yura claimed that if Yuru had not confessed first, Sehook would never have married her. Saying that, Yura ran up to Sehook, even boldly declaring that she was the one truly suited for him. What hurt Yuru the most was that Sehook did not push Yura's hand away. Instead, he looked at her with a tender gaze. Unable to bear it any longer, Yuru ran into the restroom, splashed water on her face, and tried to calm herself down. But as soon as she stepped out, she ran into Yogak again. He looked at her and mocked. "Are you really that stupid, or are you just pretending? Your husband and your sister don't respect you at all, yet you still want to act like you don't see it?" Yuru did not want to accept this reality. She only wanted to please everyone, to live a peaceful, uneventful life. She did not respond to Yogak and silently walked back to the art exhibition. However, the moment she stepped in, the sight before her was Sehook and Yura standing close together, chatting and laughing intimately. She intended to approach them for clarification, but a wealthy woman stopped her. The woman said she could not find Yuru's mother and asked her to introduce the painting. While Yuru was engrossed in explaining the artwork, she did not realize that someone accompanying the wealthy woman was secretly observing another painting. Shortly after, the auction officially began. The wealthy woman immediately placed a high bid and purchased the painting. At that moment, Yuru's mother was filled with hope, believing that she could make a substantial profit from her daughter's paintings. However, the joy was short-lived. The wealthy woman suddenly stepped forward and slapped Yuru's mother hard across the face. The entire hall fell into stunned silence. Then she publicly accused Yuru's family of selling counterfeit paintings for profit. The accusation caused an uproar. Immediately, the police arrived at the scene, ready to arrest Yuru's mother for fraud. At a critical moment, her mother's secretary whispered something to her. Her mother's expression changed instantly. She called Yuru over and demanded that she take full responsibility. She promised that when the time was right, she would send a lawyer to save Yuru. Before Yuru could process everything, the secretary quickly stepped in and declared that Yuru was the real culprit behind the counterfeit paintings. Furthermore, there was clear evidence in her car and other fake paintings were found in her studio. All eyes in the hall turned to Yuru. She stood frozen in the vast space, feeling as if the entire world was collapsing beneath her feet. It was only then that Yuru realized the documents the secretary had asked her to bring were not just ordinary files but forged certificates. From the very beginning, everything had been meticulously planned to frame her. Now that the truth had been exposed, Yuru was immediately sacrificed as a scapegoat. Seeing the police preparing to handcuff her, she panicked and ran outside to find Sehook. But the moment she arrived, she was utterly devastated by the scene before her. Sehook was confessing his love to her younger sister, Yura. Yura pretended to be pitiful, her eyes brimming with tears, before turning to accuse Yuru of fraud, claiming that she had disgraced their family. Then, as if she couldn't hold back her emotions any longer, she sobbed dramatically. Sehook was deeply moved. Without hesitation, he took Yura's hand and swore, "I will definitely divorce her and marry you." Those words froze Yuru's heart to its core. But what was even more heartbreaking was that after achieving her goal, Yura finally revealed her true colors. She sneered coldly and stated that she had never been interested in Sehook. To her, Sehook was nothing more than a disposable pawn. The conversation between the two was accidentally overheard by Yuru. Realizing this, Yura quickly left to avoid trouble. Yuru turned back and faced Sehook, her eyes burning with fury. She pulled out the resignation letter from her pocket and questioned him. "Why did you hide this from me?" Sehook did not dodge her gaze. Instead, he calmly asked her to open the envelope. Yuru's hands trembled as she pulled out another document, a divorce agreement. At that moment, the police had already caught up with her. Yuru knew she could not allow herself to be wrongfully accused. She turned and ran. However, the series of shocks had left her mind in turmoil. She drove wildly down the road, her heart consumed by rage and despair. At that moment, the phone rang. It was her mother. With a cold voice, she ordered, "Turn yourself in, consider it as repaying me for adopting you when you had nowhere to go." Yuru broke down in tears. In her daze, she didn't notice the oncoming car. A horrifying accident occurred. Yuru was rushed to the emergency room. The doctor told her mother that her right rib was fractured, her lungs were severely damaged, and even her pelvis was no longer intact. She had lost too much blood, making surgery impossible. Everything depended on fate. Her mother showed no sign of sorrow. After the doctor left, she stepped into the hospital room and coldly pulled the plug on the ventilator. When Yuru regained consciousness, her mother was staring at her, her voice indifferent as if recounting an old tale. "The first time I saw you in the orphanage, I already hated you. But I adopted you anyway, just to see when you would finally reveal your true desires. but to my surprise, after all these years, you still live like a fool, always wanting to please others. She leaned closer to Yiru's ear and whispered one final sentence. In your next life, don't be too kind. It will only bring you more suffering. After saying that, she ordered her assistant to plug the ventilator back in, covering up her crime. In her final moments, standing at the fragile boundary between life and death, Yiru made a vow. If I could live again, I would make those who hurt me pay. At any cost. The next second, an alarm bell rang. Yiru jolted awake. She opened her eyes and looked around. This was her bedroom? Outside, she heard a familiar voice. It was Yura. I don't have time to go with you to pick out your wedding dress today. Yiru was stunned. She grabbed her phone and saw the date on the screen. She had returned to the past. The day she went to try on her wedding dress 1 year ago. She instinctively looked down at her palm. A small scratch. The same wound she had gotten on that very day. Finally, she confirmed the truth. She'd been reborn. Seeing Si-hook waiting outside, she no longer hesitated. She stepped forward, pulled a pen from his pocket, and forcefully tore her wedding dress. Then she pressed the bouquet onto his head, her voice cold. This is our breakup souvenir. Then she turned and walked away. Si-hook stood frozen, unable to react. Yiru returned home and immediately told her mother she wanted to cancel the engagement with Si-hook. Si-hook panicked and chased after her all the way, trying to stop her to talk. But Yiru was no longer the weak girl of the past. She looked him straight in the eyes and sneered coldly. I know you like Yura, but you also know very well that in her eyes, you are just a poor and useless man. That's why you chose me, a wealthy adopted daughter, to climb the social ladder while staying close to Yura. Si-hook was struck hard by her sharp words. He fell into a panic, dropped to his knees, and pleaded, Yiru, please don't do this. My father invested all his money in stocks, and my mother was also scammed out of everything. My family is burdened with a huge debt. I need this marriage to save my family. He clutched her hands tightly and vowed, as long as you marry me, I will obey you and follow your every command. But Yiru only smirked with disdain. She had lived once before, and she swore she would never let herself be used again. After being reborn, Yiru was no longer swayed by Si-hook's pleas or promises. Without hesitation, she turned her back on him and walked away. When she entered the house, she happened to overhear a conversation between her mother and Yura. Standing by the door, she quietly observed. Yura revealed that the person she truly liked was Yogak, the second son of the Taija conglomerate and the CEO of a highly successful company. From childhood to adulthood, Yura had never failed in getting what she wanted. So she was filled with confidence that this time would be no different. Hearing this, Yiru turned and left, a bold idea flashing through her mind. If Yura wanted Yogak, then she wanted him too. But this time, she didn't just want to have the man Yura desired, she wanted to completely crush her sister. Yiru immediately called her closest friend, who was also Yoguk's cousin, a journalist with extensive connections. She recounted everything that had happened and asked her friend to arrange a meeting with the man Yura dreamed of. After hearing everything, the journalist helped her analyze the difficulties she would face in winning over Yoguk. First, their families were of completely different statuses. Yiru's family ran a finance company, but in reality, it was a loan shark business. Normally, the two families had no interactions. If not for her mother, Yura would have never had the chance to meet Yoguk. Second, to create an opportunity for Yura, her mother had secretly arranged a meeting between Yura and Yoguk. She had invited a wealthy lady to purchase a painting, creating an opportunity for Yura to meet Yoguk's mother and younger sister. Third, Yoguk's family dynamics were complicated. His mother and sister did not get along, so the family needed a skillful daughter-in-law to handle the situation. Finally, Yoguk himself was a talented and highly selective man when it came to women. He didn't necessarily have to choose Zura, but that didn't mean he would easily choose Zuru either. After hearing this analysis, Yiru knew she had to make the first move. She asked her friend to investigate the location of Yura and Yoguk's date the next afternoon. She decided to arrive early and approach Yoguk before Yura could. The next day, Yiru arrived at the meeting place earlier than expected. She didn't expect that as soon as Yoguk saw her, he would suddenly call out her name. It turned out that he had previously investigated Yura's family, so he also knew about her existence. Without beating around the bush, Yiru went straight to the point. I'm an adopted daughter with no blood relation to Yura. Besides, Si-hook and I have already broken up. So instead of choosing Yura, you could consider marrying me. Yoguk raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement flashing in his eyes. He had never met a woman this straightforward before. Why should I choose you? He smirked, his tone full of provocation. Yiru calmly met his sharp gaze and replied, because I can help you more than Yura. I'm smarter, more practical, and most importantly, I'm not fake like her. Yoguk chuckled softly and leaned against the chair. Interesting. But I could choose a woman far better than you. As he spoke, he pulled a key card from his pocket and placed it on the table. For example, someone more alluring. Yuru immediately understood his intentions. She clenched her fists, feeling insulted. But at that very moment, a familiar voice came from behind her. It was Yura. She had arrived and was witnessing this scene. Realizing her sister's scheme, Yuru instantly grabbed the key card without hesitation and walked straight upstairs with Yoguk. As she reached the door, she paused, her heart pounding violently against her chest. If she wasn't careful, she might really fall into Yoguk's trap. She took a deep breath, continuously reminding herself. She couldn't lose. This time, she would take everything. As soon as she stepped into the room, Yuru sighed in relief. It turned out this wasn't a hotel room, but Yoguk's workspace. Inside, there was only a sofa, a desk, and bookshelves, a space entirely appropriate for conversations, not for spending the night. Yoguk leaned against the desk, looking at her with intrigue. If you hesitate before making a deal, you'll easily become prey. Yuru immediately grasped the meaning behind his words. The psychological battle between them had only just begun. At that moment, her phone vibrated continuously. It was Zura calling. She picked up the phone, but instead of answering, she turned it off. Looks like I should stay here overnight, she said casually. Yoguk smirked in amusement. He deliberately teased. A lonely man and a woman alone in a room. Aren't you afraid something will happen? Slowly, Yoguk stepped closer to Yuru, his sharp gaze never leaving her. But contrary to his expectations, Yuru did not back down. She looked straight into his eyes, raising an eyebrow provocatively. You're not my type, but if you want to seduce me, go ahead and try. I'm not even sure I'd be interested. Yuru's bold declaration made Yoguk burst into laughter. For the first time, a woman had spoken to him with such an attitude. Very well, I'm listening. He smirked, waiting to see what else she had to say. Yuru didn't beat around the bush. Your grandmother wants you to get married. If you agree to marry me, she will invest in your company and help it successfully go public on the stock exchange. She paused for a moment, then continued. That's not all. I can also provide you with information on your competitors. I chose you because I know you're smart enough to recognize my worth. Then she casually added, oh, and one more thing. You're quite good looking. Yoguk chuckled, his eyes glinting with intrigue. What are your conditions? Yuru shrugged. During our marriage, I won't interfere in your personal affairs, nor will I fight over assets. If one day you want a divorce, I won't hold you back. Her straightforward offer only made Yoguk even more curious about her. The two raised their glasses, sealing their agreement. Feeling excited, Yuru took a few more sips of wine. After a while, she unconsciously reached up to fix her bun, but the hair tie in her hand snapped. Yoguk, who had been watching her, picked up a hair tie from the table and walked over to help her tie up her messy hair. At that moment, Yuru suddenly fell into deep thought. Did you know? She murmured, her gaze distant. Yoguk remained silent, waiting for her to continue. My life has passed like a photo album, but there hasn't been a single moment worth keeping. That just proves I've never been truly happy, not even for a second. For the first time, Yoguk's gaze on her was not just filled with curiosity, but also a hint of contemplation. As she spoke, she leaned back into the chair and quickly fell asleep. Yoguk instinctively reached out to catch her before she collapsed. Looking at her peaceful, sleeping face, he couldn't stop himself from gently stroking her hair and cheek. After a while, he carefully carried her to bed, tucked her in, and quietly left the room. The next morning, when Yuru woke up, she saw Yoguk still asleep beside her. Not wanting to cause more trouble, she tiptoed out of the room. But as soon as she stepped into her house, a sharp slap landed on her cheek from her mother. Shameless. How dare you steal your sister's man? Her father also spoke up. You should marry Sehuk as planned. Stop getting involved with Yoguk. Yuru sneered. I won't marry a man who doesn't love me. She was about to bluntly reveal that Sehuk was in love with Yura, but before she could say a word, Yura suddenly jumped up, tears streaming down her face as she feigned innocence. Sister, you're slandering me. She even fabricated a story about overhearing a conversation at a bridal shop, making it seem like Yuru was deliberately causing trouble. Watching the ridiculous drama unfold before her, Yuru suddenly laughed. Is everyone here acting in a soap opera? Then, without hesitation, she made a shocking declaration. I've already slept with Yoguk. The moment those words left her lips, Yura burst into tears while her mother, enraged, ordered Yuru to be locked in her room. Staring at the cold, lifeless walls, Yuru suddenly recalled all the times she'd been imprisoned here before for making mistakes. She realized that this room was nothing more than a cage that had confined her entire life. But this time, she refused to accept it. She remembered that she had secretly asked a journalist friend to take photos of her intimate moments with Yoguk and post them online to force him to publicly acknowledge their relationship. But to her surprise, her friend told her that Yoguk had already blocked the news from spreading. Yuru felt discouraged, but she was not someone who would give up so easily. She had to come up with another plan. Just then, her mother's secretary entered, carrying a pill and ordering her to take it. Yuru sensed something was off but pretended to obediently swallow the pill. The moment the secretary left, she quickly took the pill out of her mouth and placed it inside a medicine bottle. After that, she tied her hair up, and without realizing it, her mind drifted back to last night, the moment Yoguk had helped her fix her hair, the moment his fingers had gently brushed against her cheek. At the same time, somewhere else, Yoguk was also thinking about her. For the first time in his life, his heart wavered for a woman. But when he woke up and realized Yuru had disappeared without a word, and her phone was turned off, he was instantly filled with frustration. This time, he would not let her slip away again. Yoguk announces to his family that he is ready to marry Yuru. The entire Taija family was stunned. Everyone tried to persuade him to reconsider, warning that Yuru was unworthy of becoming a daughter-in-law of the Taija family. But at that moment, Yoguk received a phone call from Yuru. She had bribed an elementary school student to borrow a phone and call him. Her voice was hoarse, tinged with desperation. "Can you save me?" She did not forget to emphasize. "If you help me, I will provide you with more information about your competitors." Just as she finished speaking, her adoptive mother suddenly walked in. Seeing Yuru talking to Yoguk, she sneered mockingly. "Do you really think Yoguk will marry you? To him, you're nothing more than a toy for a single night. Even your real mother didn't want you. So stop dreaming. Accept reality and obediently marry Sehuk." Yuru's eyes immediately reddened with emotion. But just then, the large doors were forcefully pushed open. Yoguk appeared. He strode in and grabbed her hand, his icy gaze sweeping over every member of her family. Then, in a deep voice, he declared, "We want to hold the wedding as soon as possible." The entire room fell into stunned silence. Her adoptive mother and Yura turned pale with fury. But in stark contrast, Yuru's father seemed delighted. As a businessman, he had always dreamed of forming an alliance with the second son of the Taija conglomerate. Without hesitation, he agreed on the spot. Yura could not accept this outcome. She stood up in a fit of rage and stormed out of the room. Yoguk had no intention of staying any longer either. Before leaving, he pulled Yuru along with him. As they passed her adoptive mother, Yuru coldly extended her hand toward her. Gritting her teeth, her mother had no choice but to hand her phone back. Yoguk noticed the exchange and frowned slightly. He realized that in this house, Yuru had never been treated kindly. "From now on, you don't need to worry about Yuru anymore. I will take care of her." His blunt declaration left Yuru momentarily stunned, but she quickly crushed any false hopes that began to rise in her heart. She thought to herself Yoguk was only doing this to gain more information from her. What surprised her the most was that Yoguk did not take her to his company or any other place, but instead brought her directly to a luxurious restaurant. Yuru looked at the menu and frowned. She was not familiar with such refined cuisine. Looking at her expression, Yoguk asked her, "Don't you like these? I'm more used to eating packaged foods." He held her hand and left. "This should suit your taste better." Yura stared at the food box in her hands, and an indescribable emotion welled up inside her. She thought about how her family had always treated her with coldness, contempt, and betrayal. "Someone drugged my food," she murmured, her voice trembling. "I can no longer trust anyone in my family." Yoguk listened silently. Then, in a deep voice, he asked, "If this is the real reason you want to marry me, I'm willing to help you take revenge." Yuru looked up at him, her heart tightening. Yoguk was not a good man, but perhaps he was the only one who could help her. Without hesitation, he bent down, picked a small flower by the road, and gently placed it in her hand. "This is my engagement ring." He smirked. Yuru could not help but smile. Then suddenly, Yoguk stood up and stretched his arms out to her. "Now, hug me." Yuru blinked, thinking that he wanted her to kiss him. So she leaned in and lightly pressed a kiss to his lips. Yoguk froze in surprise. A second later, he suddenly pulled her closer, his voice low and husky. "Is that all? That's not enough." Saying that, he lowered his head and kissed her. His kiss was strong and passionate. Yuru was swept up in the intense emotions. It was not until much later, when they finally separated, that Yuru glanced down at the flower ring in her hand. Her face flushed. The next morning, her phone rang. It was the journalist. Yuru, the photos of you and Yeoguk kissing last night have been posted online. It's causing a huge stir. In front of her were countless sensational headlines. CEO of the Taija Group secretly dating the adopted daughter of the Hanu family? A passionate kiss between Yeoguk and Yuru, a declaration of a political marriage? Yuru stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Looking at the perfectly captured photos plastered all over the news, Yuru immediately recalled Yeoguk's words from last night. He had told her to dress beautifully. Suddenly understanding everything, she let out a cold laugh. So he had arranged for someone to secretly take pictures of their date. Now that the news had spread everywhere, their relationship was fully exposed. As for Yura, when she saw the news, she was so furious that she nearly exploded with rage. Yuru's father asked her about information online. Looking straight at her father, she spoke firmly. Yeoguk and I will hold a grand wedding. When the time comes, I will personally invite you and mother to attend. And most importantly, I want my dear sister to be there to receive the wedding bouquet. Her declaration was like a bucket of ice water poured over Yura. After finishing the conversation with her parents, Yuru immediately headed to Yeoguk's house. The moment she walked in, she saw him busy in the kitchen. She took a surprised step forward and asked in disbelief, "You know how to cook?" Yeoguk glanced at her and shrugged. After working for a while, he finally finished a fragrant stew. But Yuru had no appetite to enjoy it. "Why did you do it? Why arrange for our relationship to be made public?" Yeoguk answered casually, "I was afraid you would change your mind." As he spoke, he pulled out a prenuptial agreement and placed it in front of her. "Before the wedding happens, sign this." Yuru looked at the contract without hesitation. She knew that 1 year later, she would be dead. So she agreed to cooperate with him for just 1 year. She also requested, "For our wedding, I want all of your family members to be present. I want them to give us their blessings." Although he was not entirely happy that the contract would only last 1 year, in the end, Yeoguk still signed his name. From that moment on, the two officially became business partners. Yeoguk suggested that they needed a secret place to discuss strategies, and the ideal location was his private residence. He asked Yuru to move into his house. After saying that, he pulled her along to tour the house. When she stepped into the bedroom, Yuru was surprised. Yeoguk had prepared a warm, cozy room just for her, and inside the wardrobe were meticulously chosen outfits. For the first time in her life, she felt valued. Meanwhile, Yura was not sitting idly by. She sought out Sehok's younger sister and convinced her, along with Sehok's mother, to meet Yuru in an attempt to prevent the marriage. To win them over, Yura even bought a luxury brand handbag as a gift. At the same time as Yuru was about to leave the house, she was stopped by Sehok's mother. Unexpectedly, the woman knelt down in front of her, pleading. She cried desperately, begging nonstop, as if the survival of her family depended entirely on Yuru's decision. Suddenly, Yuru realized something was wrong. Sure enough, a moment later, Sehok's younger sister appeared, rushing over to embrace her mother while crying and mildly accusing. "How could you be so cruel? How could you abandon my brother just a month before the wedding to chase after a richer man? Do you have no shame?" This stage drama immediately caught the attention of bystanders. People began whispering and pointing, their eyes full of disdain directed at Yuru. For a moment, her mind went blank. All the harsh words swirled in her head like a chaotic melody. She could not take it anymore. She turned and ran away like a fugitive. In a secluded corner, her stepmother's secretary had secretly recorded the entire scene. The woman watched the video on her phone and smiled in satisfaction. Then she casually handed a thick stack of cash to Sehok's mother. Sehok's mother happily accepted the money, grinning as if she had won the lottery. What will Yuru do to resist her adoptive mother's power? Let's wait for the next part of the movie. Thank you for following along. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe to support my channel.